It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name is George Cooper, and welcome to the show. It's been a while since I've done one of these podcasts, it seems. And, you think that after a little bit of time out, there'd be plenty to talk about, betting in new signings. Oh, maybe not. Anyway, we'll come on to that in a bit. But Fulham did play in their last of the pre-season friendlies against Frankfurt on Saturday. I'm joined by two men who are in attendance. Dan Cook, how are you doing?
Doing good, thank you, Coops. Looking to this 5-minute long podcast to talk about that game.
Yeah, it's going to be short and sweet, I would say. Short and sweet. Speaking of short and sweet, we're also joined by Mr. Jack Kelly. How you doing?
I'll take that. I'll take it. Thank you very much.
There's some happy birthday wishes to send you away. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, Jack.
Thank you very much. A year closer to the inevitable.
Yeah. How you feeling? Is it a milestone birthday, or is it one in the one of the sort of throwaway ones in the middle?
Yeah,
between the
27.
noughties. 27.
So I mean, it's one of them ones where, today's not important. Tomorrow is the under-21s, and then Saturday's the game against Brighton, and Friday night's Curry night. So this is not a very important day in my week.
Fair enough. How was the game on Saturday, Jack? You in attendance? I always think with pre-season friendlies, the weather's always nice. There's a sort of sense of excitement for what's to come. Maybe the pressure off slightly because the result doesn't ultimately matter all that much. Just people are just starting to get that kind of excitement going again. Did you feel that in the air on Saturday, or were there some different kind of emotions flying about? Would you say?
I always find that the last game of pre-season, especially at the Cottage, which we haven't had for a couple of years, is like the most exciting, but also like the least exciting day in football, because it's like, oh, we're back, and then you realise, well, we're not really back. It's just sort of a dress rehearsal for the opening game of the season, and I didn't sense an awful lot of optimism around the crowd, the crowd and the ground on Saturday. I thought it was just quite a tame affair, and obviously, I think you want it to be that way. You want it to be intense because you want to see, if the team are up for next week, but also you don't want it to be a case of you're dropping like flies and then having players come off injured like we saw with Ryan Sessegnon in the first half. So it's been a weird summer. It feels as if not much has changed apart from maybe the shirts. And yeah, it was a bit low key, but we are now in game week 1, the week of. So it's starting to get quite exciting now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, I know you spoke with Sammy and Jack on the Thursday Club in the last pods about where the fan base are at in terms of the squad at the moment, and it seems to be a bit of a divided opinion. Obviously, Jack, I know you and Joe spoke, and Joe in particular was very, strong in his sense that we haven't done enough and it should be panic stations. Sammy was a little more level-headed, saying that, whether it's now or on the deadline, it's not actually going to make that much difference in the, in the grand scheme of things. Dan, how did you feel, just being at the ground on Saturday, sort of chatting to fans before the game? What was the sort of general? Obviously, Jack was in the press box, but what was the feeling like in the terraces?
I think ultimately it was a sort of a feeling of familiarity. There wasn't that excitement because we weren't seeing anything new, but there was that nice continuity that we knew what we were seeing. Yeah, there was sometimes when you get new signings, there's like an excitement and an apprehension. You're like, oh my god, I hope he looks good. Whereas this was actually the starting 11 that we know what everyone on that pitch was about, and I don't think there was any surprises, and that led to a fairly easygoing atmosphere. It was quite nice. I think everyone had sort of a nice day out. The riverside was set up beautifully, actually, and obviously there are all the issues with it, which we've spoken about loads. But actually, as an experience and just going along the riverside, being on that pier before the game was really nice. Lovely vibe. DJ in there, people on deck chairs having drinks. It was like a lovely little day by the river. But yeah, certainly no excitement. It was a bit sort of just flat and everyone there for a bit of a jolly, which is fine. I think most preseason games are like that anyway. It's just I think it made it feel more drab because there was no one that we were necessarily focusing on. So there was no one that you could lock in on and be like, right, I'm going to really have a look at how they performed today. It was just the same starting 11, pretty much the starting 11 that I would expect next week. And there are positives and negatives to that. Let's say that.
It was very strong starting 11, as you said, Dan. So Leno lined up in goal, back four of Tete, Anderson, Bassi, and Sess. Lukic and Sonderberger in the middle, and then Wilson, King at number 10, and Iwobi out on the left with Raul up top. I would really not be surprised if that is the lineup for Brighton. Jack, do you agree? Do you think that there's, I think I would almost say that's pretty nailed on, really. Interesting to see King at number 10. I think that was quite a sign from Marco of, I believe that, we'll see a lot more of King this season than we did last. But any other surprises in there for you?
No, I think that is it. Maybe it's Raul versus Rodrigo, and it could be Smith Rowe versus King. In terms of the number 10 position, I think apart from that, it looks pretty settled. I would love to see King start against Brighton. I think he's got the world at his feet and he's ready to go. But it would be interesting. When the first real question that I want to put to Marco, apart from all the transfer stuff in terms of stuff on the pitch, is when are we going to see Smith Rowe play 90 minutes for the first time for Fulham? And to see King start over Smith Rowe on Saturday potentially would be a massive sort of, oh, okay, so let's actually play King and start King. And I thought this would be a great opportunity for Smith Rowe to get off the ground running with 90 minutes. But we'll see what happens. Of course, there was a game earlier on in the day. So if I just run it through my head, I've been trying to sort of work it out. So it probably was something like Lecomte, Castagna, Diop, Cuenca, Asenga, and then it would have been Harrison Reed, or Pereira, Smith Rowe, perhaps, Muniz, and someone on the right-hand side, Adama Traore. So, yeah, this is obviously going to be very interesting. I'd like to see that sort of starting 11 at Brighton. I'd like to see Rodrigo Muniz start. However, if we get a free kick from 30 yards out, Raul Jimenez is over it. What a free kick.
Yeah, we'll come on to Raul's goal shortly because it's the sort of goal that we see him banging for Mexico time and time again, and I think that he's really made a huge claim to be our designated free kick taker this year with that goal. It was brilliant, 30 yards out. But it was interesting how we had that game, another game, it was the 11s as they referred to it, Dan, before the kind of, I don't know, the main event, however you want to describe it. There are some reports flying around at the moment that Muniz either asked to not play in the main event and like not be featured, and he obviously didn't feature in the game that was on beforehand. Do you think there's much credence in these rumours, or are these just kind of, just where did you see this report? Because I know you dropped it in the group chat beforehand. I haven't had a chance to dig into it before we hit record. So what have you seen?
It was reports from a newspaper in Italy who obviously have a vested interest. They want news on Atalanta, who are the front runners for Rodrigo. Me and Jack spoke about it briefly over text just before we came on. I get a sense that they've spotted that he wasn't in the squad for that main fixture and have decided that means he didn't feature at all and must have asked not to play. Until we know who played in that first game, I think it's pretty impossible to decipher anything. And so I'm not overly concerned. If reports come out that he didn't play in that first game either, then I start to get concerned. Then there feels like there's real credence behind this. There's a real story there. But either we hear about it in the week, or when that lineup drops on Saturday and he's not in the squad, then we've got a real story on our hands. Until then, I'm not too bothered. And I do think, and I know we spoke about it on the Thursday Club, I think Fulham have enough power in this situation that if we don't want him to go, we can make him stay. And it probably just falls down to giving him a new contract, which he deserves. I like flat out. I don't think there's any question. He deserves a new contract. He signed on championship wages as a rookie. He's now a full Premier League striker with Premier League goals in him. He deserves a new contract, and I think if we present one that's attractive enough, these rumours go away, and we see at least one more year of him.
Well, I mean, I have inquired whilst that since that story's come out, and I'll try and follow it up, but I'm fairly sort of out and about today. But essentially, someone texted me on Saturday and said, "Oh, have you seen Muniz's body language walking across the pitch? Hood down, not really interacting." And I was like, "Well, he's probably just tired. If he played a game earlier, maybe he just doesn't want to. He just wants to get on with it." Look, I could imagine a scenario where this story gets out, which is now already out, and the club see it and they go, "Well, we need to sort of calm this down a little bit because it's not true." Therefore, when the players are back in training, let's put a nice picture up of Rodrigo with the thumbs up or smiling. And I reckon that would be something they would do just to give the fans a little bit like, "Oh, he's fine." If there is something to this, and I'm just reading through Twitter now, and some of the quote tweets from that report, Fulham fans saying, "Well, if that's the case, then off you go," and etc. etc. Look, this is it's 2 + 2 = 5 in my opinion. The body language thing, I hate. Pre-season is like so. Oh, have you seen his body language? Blah blah blah. Like there's so much over analyzing people's body language when it comes to pre-season games, and like when there's speculation about players leaving. It's incredibly boring. It's incredibly tedious. But if there's something to it, that's obviously a massive worry. But for now, we'll just cross our fingers that it's not true.
Yeah, I think it would be a real shame to see him go. I mean, obviously, with all of the pulling power that Atalanta has, I know obviously you guys spoke about it on the Thursday Club. I'm a little bit more nervous than I'd like to be, but I guess we'll see what the outcome is this time next week. Effectively, our other striker, as I mentioned, banged in an absolutely sumptuous free kick. Dan, 30 yards, would you say? 35 yards? It was miles out, but I mean, Raul showing exactly how you kick a dead ball, and I mean, hopefully we can see a few more of them from him this season. How did it look like from the stands?
I was perfectly placed. I was sort of midway up the Hammersmith end, behind the goal, so I was looking straight down the other end of the pitch, right behind it, and it was one of those, like, it felt like it was too far out, and I knew it was either him or Wilson having a go, and I turned to my nephew, who I took along yesterday. I was like, Raul's got a decent free kick on him. He scored a couple last season for Mexico. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes this. And you just see that arc, and as soon as it clears the wall, you're like, that's in. There's no saving that. And it was a beautiful, lovely to see, good confidence booster. We can say again, like, we can talk about the striker conundrum and however much we want. Raul is going to play a fairly large part this season, regardless of whether Rodrigo stays or goes. Obviously, a bigger role if he does leave. So you want goals in him. I think that's a great way for him to head off into the season. And it really raises the question why the hell we waste our time with Andreas Pereira over set pieces. Actually fed up with it. Like, I know, like, the corners are one thing, but when you've got a striker who's now scored 3 free kicks in the space of about a year, like, let him take them. Like, it's not hard. Like, he's clearly good at them, and I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, Neeskins Cabano kind of numbers that he's bringing in. Also, it's not as if it's a secret. Like, his record from the penalty spot is unparalleled within our squad, and yet somehow Pereira is our kind of dead ball specialist, when clearly, it should be Raul, in our opinion anyway. There were some other good sort of run-ins. I thought Josh King looked very lively, Jack. I was sort of following your updates from the stands, Dan. You said that he looked very eager. I think you said that occasionally could run himself into some bother. And what were the other words that you used to describe? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
I guess the way I wrote an article about Josh King last week, because I think this pre-season has been fantastic for him, and also his relationship with Emil Smith-Rowe seems to be growing, which I think was really the focus of the article. And I said for Josh King that he balances really nicely on the edge of confident versus arrogant. And yeah, on Saturday it felt like he maybe just teetered a little bit over onto the arrogant side and was doing a little bit too much. Overall, the performance was fantastic. He showed incredible flashes of brilliance with, little touches here and there. There was one moment in the second half where he took a couple of touches to shift it round a defender on the edge of the box, and in that moment, oh my God, this guy's so good. But there were other occasions where he'd beat a man and then he'd go to try and take another one on and another one. And I saw a couple of times, it was Lukic in particular, just held his hands up at one point, being like, that's too much. And you know, it's fine to test out in preseason friendlies ultimately. Like, I don't mind, but he has got the confidence in him that I think is so important. And you see in other youngsters who are flourishing at Premier League level. If I think of someone like a Mars Lewis Skelly, who has been thrown into an incredibly pressured scenario, but has enough belief in himself and enough confidence in himself to just step up to it. And I'm seeing the same attitude in Josh King, which I think is fantastic. And I agree with Jack. I think he is really knocking on starting on Saturday. And I think the question becomes, is that instead of Smith Rowe or potentially instead of Alex Iwobi, because we've seen Smith Rowe play out on that left flank with Josh King in the 10, and I'm intrigued to see that. I quite like that as a rotation happening out wide, but overall, probably Josh King was the most positive story out of Saturday, even if he took it a bit far at times.
No, it was a very, very confident display, and as you say, he just has that confidence. Maybe it's youth, the arrogance of youth, but he plays with a certain fearlessness, which is very precocious, you know, beyond his years. There was a slightly concerning injury to Ryan Sessegnon. He came off after 22 minutes, was replaced by the 18-year-old Sam Amissa. It was nice to see him get a run out. I don't think there's all that much to be concerned about. There was a video that got put onto the Fulhamish Telegram that somebody had taken from the sidelines. Forgive me, I don't know who exactly it was, so I can't give you a credit, but effectively they were asking Sess straight up, is it that bad? And Sess is like, nah, it's just a precaution. Have you heard anything more, Jack, from inside the camp? I think Marco also said that he expects Sess to be in contention come the Brighton match, so I feel like it's not really too much to worry about, unless you've heard anything to the contrary.
Well, he said that it was a bit of both, which is one of my favourite sayings, but he basically said it was precautionary and he felt something. So he said we'll do exams and scans over the next couple of days and then we'll see. I don't necessarily actually think he came out and said he'll be fine for Brighton, but the feeling is from that, you know, again, I'm talking body language again, from Sessegnon sort of giving the thumbs up to the fans, makes it sort of feel like it's okay, and they will check it, obviously. Of course, they'll have a look, but I don't necessarily think he'll be absent for Brighton. I think he'll be there, and the left back situation is incredibly alarming at the moment. John Asenga, Samuel Amissa, Ryan Sessegnon, no Jedi, but you could have Bassi play there, you could have Cuenca play there if need be. So there are options, but it's definitely a position I'd be looking at in the market. But it's increasingly getting, you know, we're on Monday of match day 1, and I'm starting to feel a bit of panic in the streets of Stevenage Road at the moment, really.
I mean, it was only 20 minutes, and so you can't judge it a huge amount, but I did think that Sess played really well in those first 20, and particularly what caught my eye was his defensive contributions. There were 2 moments in those first 20 minutes where Frankfurt got into really dangerous areas. There was one where he managed to cover a run and just push Frankfurt forward wide and away from goal, which was a brilliant, smart bit of work. And there was another point.
Ahoya, wasn't it? Ahoya was causing us some issues, but yeah.
It was causing big issues. And then there was another one where he was just alert at the back post and cleared a sort of a low ball that came across the face of goal. And those were 2 just little flashes of like, I think Sess has just rebuilt a little bit of that confidence in the back line as well. We obviously saw him playing off on that left wing towards the end of last season and thriving. I had reservations about him at left back because when he first came into the team at the start of last year, he looked troubled. But it was a very confident display in that first 20 minutes. And so as long as he is fit, whilst Jedi being out is a big problem because he's one of our best players, I feel comfortable with the idea of Sess playing there, which I wouldn't have felt comfortable with a year ago.
Yeah, I guess it's not the worst backup option in the world, is it, Sess? I know obviously his strength seemed to be in the more kind of forward position on that left flank, but as a short-term solution while we await the return of Jedi, as you say, Dan, I think we could do a lot worse. Should we just say? Rounding off on the Frankfurt friendly, there are a few funny things that I thought worth mentioning. So I caught up with the highlights on Fulham TV. Gentleman Jim, as always, was providing some excellent commentary, entertaining. It almost felt like a kind of cricket commentary at times, sort of like wandering off into sort of like, thoughts and kind of pontificating on certain things. He laid into the green kit, interestingly.
Wow.
Called it disgusting, which I thought was was against the broad kind of opinion of the fan base, which seems to have been met with positivity, unless I'm very much in my own echo chamber. But I thought it was quite funny. Also, Dan, I enjoyed you mentioning that Josh King walked out with a mascot who was taller than him, which was quite funny. How much taller are we talking? Are we like a full foot, or?
I would say a few inches. I mean, to go back to cricket, like there's England's opening batters are about a foot apart in height, and they always make them stand next to each other during the national anthems, because it just looks very funny when the camera pans across and it goes tall person then drops down, very much like when me and Jack Kelly did a quick take together. It
Newcastle away.
It just looks. We both end up looking a bit silly, and I just thought it was funny. There might have been a family relation or family friend of Josh King who was walking out with him, but if it wasn't, it feels like he's been stitched up there.
Yeah, was it almost like a kind of sometimes you see like lower leagues, like there'll be a stag do and they'll get the stag to come out with the player, like just fully grown man. Was it one of those kind of situations?
It wasn't quite like that. But same comedic factor.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, that will do for part one. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to be talking about some other Fulham news, including updates on the Kevin transfer and a few other bits. So, yeah.
The 25-26 season is shaping up to be a big one for Fulham, and one thing you need ahead of it is NordVPN, the fastest VPN on the planet that allows you to watch football matches from wherever you are in the world on either your phone, your tablet, or your laptop. For instance, you could use NordVPN to watch Premier League matches for a fraction of the price, including those 3 p.m. kickoffs that aren't available in this country. Or if you go on holiday this summer, you can use NordVPN to access your UK TV subscriptions. And right now, you can use NordVPN on up to 10 devices, which means you can share the amazing benefits that NordVPN has with your family or your friends. And you can get a great deal when you sign up to NordVPN at nordvpn.com/Fulhamish. Not only will you get a huge discount, but you'll also get 4 months extra as well. And it's entirely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So to get that special discount plus 4 free months, go to nordvpn.com/Fulhamish. That's nordvpn.com/Fulhamish.
Welcome back. It's the Fulhamish podcast. George Cooper here. I'm joined by Dan Cook and Jack Kelly. How you both doing, fellas?
Very well. Let's hope this second half is more entertaining than the one on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very low bar. So I think we're doing something wrong if we don't hit those heights. It would be a lot shorter.
If I can just, anyone who didn't see the game on Saturday, just to give you an idea of how dull that second half was, I was there with my nephew and my partner, and my partner Ellie turned to me about 60 minutes in. She really loves coming to the football. She's now a de facto Fulham fan. She turned to me at 60 minutes and went, hypothetically, if I turned to you right now and said, shall we go home, what would you say? And I turned to my left to my 15-year-old nephew, and he was watching football edits on TikTok because it was way more interesting.
Oh dear. I think she could have bypassed the hypothetical question and just got straight to the point. And was it really? I mean, I watched the highlights, and thankfully there's a playback option in which you can watch it on 2x speed. So it sort of zoomed through. Had a very high pitched Gentleman Jim and Jamie keeping me company. But I mean, being there, was it really as bad as they say, Jack?
I think I may have tweeted 5 or 6 times in the second half, and 2 was probably a substitution. The best part of the second half was the sun was right in my face, and I was just topping up the tan from Portugal, so that was beautiful.
You're looking very bronzed, has to be said.
No, yeah, it's been a good couple of weeks for the sun, for myself in front of the sun, not the newspaper. Also,
the sun's in form.
The sun is great. It's a good day for the sun.
Going through a hot streak.
A real purple patch for the sun at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's doing well. It's getting in its minutes up in the sky. Anyway, back to the football. Yeah, I mean, there was nothing really to shout. I actually can't remember a chance we had in the second half. Josh King went under a challenge for a penalty. Didn't really look it to me. They hit the post, but apart from that, genuinely, I was reading up on the Championship, League One and League Two scores and just sort of entertain myself in that way. But look, it is what it is. I mean, I'm glad it wasn't intense and everyone was flying in with tackles. No one was flying in with tackles. And but also, if it's that second half against Brighton and Hove Albion, that might just be enough to send me to sleep, because it was pretty somber. No, not somber. It was pretty dull.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting bigger things for the opening day. So yeah, I will take a slow and sleepy second half in the last pre-season friendly any day of the week. Before we get into some Fulham transfer bits, Footwork, the production company I run with Mr. Sammy James, has a new endeavour at the moment that we'd like to just give a quick mention to. So it's called First Up Football. It's a brand new podcast, and it's also going on YouTube as well. We're visualising it, so you can watch on full videos as well if that's what you prefer. But in a nutshell, it's a daily football podcast in which we bring you up to date with everything that's happening in the world of football in a really nice, succinct 10-minute little burst. It's been something that we've been working on for a few years now by various different iterations, but we're relaunching it as a Footwork independent production. So if you have a spare 10 minutes, we would really appreciate it if you just go and check it out. Maybe give us a follow on our channels. We're starting it out. It's an independent endeavour, so we are launching this completely off our own back, and it's been a real thing that we've been working on behind the scenes for a good few months now. We're very proud of it. We think it's a really solid offering. It's lighthearted, it's quick, it's to the point, it's direct. It's for people who love to keep across all the football but don't have all the hours of the day to span the internet trying to keep in touch with everything. So yeah, I just saw Jack giving it a little follow there. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Dan, you giving it a listen?
Yeah, from my perspective, and I think this will apply for a lot of people, I've had a summer off of football. I took a step back. I was ready for the season to end. I've thrown myself into cricket and been right in touch with the cricket all summer. And so actually listening now to a daily pod that really has just got me back up to speed. I've kept within Fulham circles, but outside of that, I've just had no football coming into my brain. So if you're like me, it's the perfect way to get yourself back in the swing of things ahead of Saturday.
On the opposite, I've probably stepped into football a little bit too much this summer. So look, an extra 13 minutes of podcast in my ear is fine. I have it's more than fine. I've got a long list of podcasts I do listen to. I'm still behind, trying to catch up on cliches and not the top 20. But no, this is going to be fantastic, and I recommend to follow, like, subscribe, and etc.
Cheers, Jack. And it's hosted by our very own Mr. Sammy James. So if you're listening to this podcast, I imagine that you are a fan of his broadcasting dulcet tones. So yeah, any kind of support that you can give us would be much appreciated. So yeah, back to Fulham. So Fabrizio Romano has tweeted on Sunday an update in the Kevin situation. So he said Fulham submit new official bid to sign Brazilian winger Kevin from Shakhtar. Understand proposal worth 37 million euros plus add-ons, while Shakhtar insist on 50 million euros for their gem. What are your thoughts on this one, Jack Kelly? I know that obviously you guys spoke about the Kevin situation, and I think at the time the bid was floated around 30 million euros. So obviously, it's been an increase. Would suggest that we're keen on landing this one, but obviously there's been a lot of discussion about whether it's a bit of a risk for somebody who is, I mean, obviously he's been scoring goals for Shakhtar, but very hard to watch them given the circumstances with the war and everything. Dividing opinion, I would say. A lot of the discourse I'm seeing on Twitter is that it seems like a bit of a risky one, to be honest. But yeah, how do you feel about Fulham's new inflated bid?
Well, it shows we've got money to spend completely. There's been a lot of reporting this summer about what we can do, what we can't do. It's just all been incredibly confusing. And it shows, obviously, we have money. We are willing to put money on the table for players. Both these rumours and both these tweets from Fabrizio came up about 10:30 at night. both of times I've been half cut and essentially not on the ball. So it's been a bit of a surprise. So have had to do sort of the morning read up on him whilst sort of nursing a hangover, which has been quite fun. But look, again, I can't say I've ever seen him play, ever. But he's a Brazilian with one name of who played for Shakhtar. You know, we've been here before with Willian. Yeah, I can understand the quota here. Look, I'm glad that we're putting money on the table. I'm glad that we've been rebuffed and we've gone in again to essentially up the price. They want 50 million euros and we've offered 37. So there's going to have to be some sort of compromise on either end. Apparently he's injured right now, which brilliant. So that helps. But look, we'll see what happens with Kevin. It sounds exciting. There's a couple of clips going around where he's basically the best winger in the world, but his numbers don't necessarily show that. But we need a player in, and at the moment, I would take Kevin McAllister from Home Alone.
Oh yeah, I mean there is something. I think it was. I don't know whether this is a football cliches or football ramble observation, but there is something inherently exciting about Brazilians who come via Shakhtar Donetsk with one name that sound like they could be sort of middle-aged, or your granddad effectively. We're talking Fred, we're talking Kevin, we're talking Bernard, or Bernard, as I'm sure he was probably referred to. But yeah, there's not little known about him. I think he's made like 66 appearances, 11 goals, which for a winger is pretty good turnaround. But again, it's like not massive sample size that we're going off here. So I guess we'll see how this one unfolds. But if we know anything about the Fulham recruitment model, it's data driven. He's going to be exciting in that regard. He's going to have numbers that back up the kind of, I don't know, flair and glamour perhaps of a Brazilian signing. So I guess we'll see how this one pans out. But intriguing, I would say, because I didn't think there was that much credence in this one, but Fabrizio suggesting otherwise.
Going to monologue a little bit here. I've got mixed feelings about this one. When you talk about data and data driven, I think that his numbers do stack up to this. I think that key takeaways from the type of player he appears to be, based on his numbers, generates a high XG, which and it takes a high number of shots, which sort of go hand in hand. But that is, I think, something that Fulham are after, is a wide player who is a goal threat. Think another Harry Wilson playing on the other flank, a different option to Harry Wilson. If you consider what we've got out there at the moment, they're not necessarily big goal threats, they're more creators. So I think that fits the profile nicely. He's also takes a lot of players on. So when you're looking at take-ons and progressive carries, he picks the ball up and he runs at people and he drives you up the pitch, which I think is another thing that Fulham are lacking and need. And then outside of the numbers, but just through visual, through the clips I've seen, he's quick as well, which again stacks up. These are all things that I think this is exactly the sort of profile of winger that Fulham are looking to bring in, that just give us a different option and additional goal threat. We know that we maybe don't have the most prolific of strikers, and last season we relied on a lot of players chipping in with goals here and there to bring up our goal tally. My issue with this is, and where I'm still not sure if I believe that Fulham are really truly in for him, is he, as a player, 22 years old, playing for Shakhtar, having only recently really joined them from Brazil, for the fee we're talking about, just does not stack up with the sort of business Fulham tend to do. If I look through players that we have, like players who sit in our top 10 record transfers, I'm going to just hand pick a few of them to give a flavour. Smith Rowe, Joachim Andersen, Alex Iwobi, Joao Palhinha, Frank Zambo-Anguissa, Mitrovic, Berger, Bassi, Diop. These are all players who were, I mean, pretty much all of them were playing in the Premier League, but the ones who weren't were playing in a top 5 European league. They were, barring Anguissa, entering their prime already. And that was a fee that felt like less of a risk because you're buying a known quantity. I've not seen Fulham go after players for such a big fee who are unproven. And this is where I feel uneasy with it, because he could be fantastic and he looks great, and there's obviously a lot of potential there. But for a team like us, a team like Fulham, the risk is massive. That's a huge risk. You know, that is probably what, 70% of our budget for the whole summer on a 22-year-old winger who has got 66 games in professional football under their belt. It just doesn't feel very us. And so, one, I'm not too sure if I trust these rumours, but two, if they're real, I'm a little bit worried, because I called for ambition and Marco has called for ambition. But it feels like this is less ambitious and more reckless almost. It doesn't feel like the signing we can take so much of a risk on. So I'm undecided on this one, and I'm still waiting because I just don't quite buy it.
Yeah, especially given Fulham's form in our sort of flagship record signings of yesteryear, it's not something that generally tends to go our way either. So yeah, I don't know. It does feel incredibly. I'm hesitant to say reckless, but there's something about it which makes me feel very.
It is quite erratic. It is quite erratic, and it doesn't match up to anything we've done so far this summer. I'm under the impression that we're going to go big on players at some point, right? So maybe I did see this coming, but given we haven't really put any bids for anyone this window, it does come as a bit of a shock when you just see 30 million just slapped down on the table, then up to 37. Yeah, again, sort of echo what Dan said. It does feel a bit, does feel a bit not suspicious. It's obviously exciting on paper, but it's a lot of money for a player who apparently is injured as well at the moment. So I don't really know what's going on at this moment in time.
Yeah, we'll see how this one plays out, but yeah, something slightly odd maybe. Another player that we've been linked with, it's worth mentioning that it's not a huge source. It's an Italian outlet that's reporting that we're in for Mehdi Taremi, who we've pretty much been linked with for many seasons now, but obviously it hasn't worked out for him at Inter Milan. Iranian, 33. Similar profile, I would say, to Raul, if you'd say so. Yeah, sort of similar kind of player. Very good finisher, technically gifted. But yeah, it just seems like, I don't know, maybe there's not too much in this rumour, but it's interesting noting that Leeds are also supposedly in for him as well, which could, if this does come into fruition, mean that mark an end of their Muniz pursuit. But yeah, any thoughts on this particular link, Dan, or do you think there's nothing really in it?
I don't think there's a huge amount in it. The only way I see us moving for a striker of this sort of stature is if we see an outgoing up top, because Taremi is not going to come in and play second, third fiddle, and so therefore the only way I see this happening is if Rodrigo goes or Raul steps away, which I think feels incredibly unlikely. So I wouldn't expect it. I mean, I would be very grumpy, I'll be honest, if we do what we did 2 years ago when we lost Alexander Mitrovic and replaced him with Raul Jimenez. This feels like a very similar thing. If Rodrigo Muniz goes and we replace with Mehdi Taremi, that, to me, I'm going to start kicking up a real fuss if that happens, because it's not ambitious, it's not forward thinking, it's temporarily plugging a gap with a player who you think will do just enough to get us to a position that we're just about happy with. I like him. I think he fits us his profile, as you said, I think fits us. But I just don't. I wouldn't be happy with that. So I'm not buying any of this at the moment.
Yeah, perhaps one not to read too deeply into, but I don't know. Expecting some activity in this last sort of last spell before the season kicks off again. Or I mean, obviously the window remains open for the first few weeks of the season, so there's still time to get some names in.
Yeah, there's still time to get in some names, but yet again we're going to be sat in the same situation as we were last season, albeit it wasn't too bad. But there's going to be, because there's hopefully going to be 2 or 3 players coming in. I hope. Whereas Sander Berger came in without a pre-season, played against Villa, got pressed to high heaven, and we ended up losing the game, and it was a bit of a nightmare. Albeit a week later we went to Everton and did very, very well. But it's the idea that I cannot believe we're sat here on August 11th saying this, right? Players need to come in for pre-season to get to know the system, to get to know the players, to get to know everything about the manager and what he wants to do, so that they could be prepared for the open game of the season, the opening 3 games, which, by the way, they're no easy games. Brighton away, we lost. Man United at home last season, we lost. Chelsea away, we won, but it was, a last-minute winner. And suddenly, you're 3 games into the season and you've got a player or a couple of players who maybe aren't match fit, maybe aren't ready. That then pushes it into September, and you got to play Leeds and Brentford and Villa and all these really scary, horrible teams. And look, I completely understand Marco Silva's frustration. I have never seen, and this is, you all go watch this, Club Media, after the game against Frankfurt, he sounded and looked incredibly frustrated, obviously, demotivated, worrying, and just like this complete and utter sort of lethargic, not lethargic like being a bad thing, but his energy was just not there. And okay, it's pre-season, whatever, it's the last game, he just wants to get on with things in terms of Premier League. But it was a huge concern, just from that body language. I can't believe I've sort of sat here saying, "Oh, body language isn't important," and I've referenced it 3 times in this podcast. Maybe it is important. Maybe I'm a complete hypocrite, but yeah, I'm concerned, Dan and George.
I think we've but everyone can relate to this. Like in everyone's own professional lives, they can relate to being in a job where suddenly they feel like they've hit a dead end. They've hit a ceiling where, I mean, based on how everything is around me, I can't progress any further. I can't push on. I can't grow. And I imagine that's his headspace currently. And of course, we can swing it around, but I would totally understand him being demotivated, because he is so forward-thinking and driven and ambitious that when that doesn't match up with where you are working, you start losing that sort of zing in your day-to-day, because you're not feeling supported, you're not feeling backed, and it's going to take something special in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think, to get Marco Silva fizzing again.
Yeah, I mean, his comments afterwards, he said, we hope we can strengthen the squad in the 3 or 4 positions we need to before the first game. So, I mean, the same before Brighton. So, it's a matter of days now. Some positions are really short and we have to add players. Yes, until the end of the market, because it's not where we expect in this moment of the season. I don't have at least 1, 2 or 3 players we need for the beginning of the season. So, yeah, there's obviously frustration coming through there.
So not to rant too much, but just the one other thing that stinks is the fact that he comes out and says this after clearly the club have gone out, used the press as a mouthpiece to say that Fulham, we hadn't intended to do any transfer business by this point. We're not overly worried. We're assessing our options, but there was no urgent need for signings. And that PR spin stinks. I hate that, because they're all they care about in this situation is managing public perception. And then a day later, your manager comes out and basically tells the whole world that that's rubbish. And he's not said it specifically, but if he's complaining that he wanted 2 or 3 players in and they're not there, then that clearly doesn't match up with what the club are saying. This was intentional.
Bear in mind, those questions were not like, how do you feel about the squad? It's more a case of the questions that are unprovoking that answer, and yet he's still coming out and saying it. And that's twice that's happened this summer. I can't say too much because of my position, but that in itself is incredibly worrying. The first time he's going to, sit in front of the media on Thursday for the press conference against Brighton, where the shackles are off. The shackles are off. There's going to be questions from Sky, PLP, whoever's there, myself, and I'm feeling the pressure because I know I've got to ask the right questions, but I'm certainly feeling like this is going to be one of the most explosive press conferences in Fulham's recent history. I'm very much looking forward to it, but I fear what's going to be said.
Oof. It's got me feeling very anxious for the start of the season there, Jack. But hopefully we can be celebrating a few exciting names landing in the squad roster between now and then. But if not, expect some fireworks, as you say. But I think that's all we've got time for today, gentlemen. I know, Jack, you've got birthday plans to go and attend. So yeah, many happy returns, mate. I hope you have a lovely day. And thank you for your time today, and thank you as well, Dan Cook.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.
So safe travels to everyone making the trip down to the South Coast on Saturday. Hopefully we'll be celebrating a positive start for Fulham. Fulhamish will be back on Thursday for the Thursday Club. Jack, you will be joining Peter Rutzler, Jack Collins and Sammy to do our annual kick off the season pod. So you'll be hearing the predictions and all that. It's always a fan favourite, that one, so do make sure you tune in for that. But until then, have a fantastic week and come on, you Whites.